I recorded the terrifying truth behind cybercrime, and what I found was unbelievable. I never should have opened that door. The chill that slithered down my spine whispered warnings I ignored. I was just a regular guy, living my normal life, jumping from work to home, from takeout to Netflix. But that night, it felt like stepping into a movie I couldn't pause. The room was dark, like a coffin, and the cold wrapped around me, creeping into my bones. As I sat at my desk, the only light flickered from the computer screen. Shadows danced along the walls, grotesque shapes twisting as I clicked through endless security reports. My heart raced. The deeper I dug, the more the air thickened with something unsettling. Whispers seemed to echo from the screen, nonsensical murmurs filling the space around me, making it hard to breathe. Noise. A scratching sound crept from the corner, like tiny nails clawing against the wood. I spun around, eyes wide, heart hammering in my chest. Nothing. Just the same stale air and the faint hum of my laptop. But I felt it, something was lurking, watching. I tried to focus, but my hands trembled over the keys, the paranoia gnawing at me. Another sound, louder this time, a thud. My pulse quickened. I could smell fear, sharp like metal. The darkness consumed the corners of my room, and shadows stretched and twisted, merging into a single, pulsating mass. I wanted to turn on the light, but somehow I felt drawn deeper into the screen, into a world of hidden dangers and exposed secrets. With every click, every scroll, I unearthed horrors. People's identities stolen, lives wrecked, all governed by faceless thieves in the digital abyss. But then, I found something, a link that shouldn't exist, a portal to something darker. My stomach churned. I hesitated. Should I click? I remembered the warnings, the stories of those who lost everything. But the curiosity clawed at me, fighting against my better judgment, and just as my finger hovered over the mouse, a loud bang echoed from behind me. The door slammed shut, shaking the walls around me. I spun, breath hitching, pulse racing. In the deep silence that followed, all I could hear was the frantic beating of my heart and the cold wind howling outside. That S when I saw it, a shadow shifting in the corner, forming a figure. My blood ran cold. A scream clawed at my throat, but no sound came out, just darkness engulfing everything. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure lurked just beyond the threshold of the darkness, an unimaginable presence cloaked in murkiness that frayed the edges of my sanity. My senses were dulled and heightened all at once, fighting against the dread saturating the room like a thick fog. I could see the outline, a human form, perhaps, but the proportions felt grotesque. The head tilted unnaturally, and I sensed its soulless eyes boring into my own. That I took one tentative step away from the desk, but my legs trembled, roots growing into the floorboards. The figure seemed to sway with the ebb of my heart, synchronizing with the growing rhythm of terror that pulsated in my ears. I wanted to scream, to call for help, but the words turned to ash in my mouth, strangled by an invisible hand. Then, it smiled. At least, that's what my brain tried to make sense of. A stretching grin, revealing a cavernous mouth filled with jagged, glistening teeth that radiated an otherworldly menace. My own reflection in its eyes twisted, showing not my fear but something darker that lurked deep within me. Memories I had buried rose to the surface, each one sharper and more poignant than the last. Failure, loss, and regret tethered tightly in the web of my consciousness. The screen behind me brightened, glowing with an eerie luminescence that threatened to banish the shadows. Suddenly, a cacophony erupted from the speakers. Distorted voices, muffled cries wove a tapestry of despair that wrapped around me, squeezing. They know, they seem to say. They are coming for you too. But before I could grasp what they meant, the figure lunged, blurring with sudden speed. I stumbled backward, my hands slamming against the wall, clawing for support as the air thickened around me. A laugh erupted, brittle and jagged, echoing not from the figure but from the depths of the screen. In my panic, I turned my gaze back to the computer, a mistake that threatened to consume my very soul. The link I had hesitated over now pulsed with malevolent energy, alluring and sickening. I realized with horrified clarity that the one who watched from the shadows was a mere projection of the true horror unfolding within the confines of the digital world. The darkness in my room felt lively, almost sentient. The shadows were alive and feasting upon my dread. "Welcome," it whispered, the voice of the figure melding with the cacophony from the screen. "Welcome to the unseen." In a frantic moment of survival, I lunged for the power button, desperate to pull myself out of the malevolent grip of that infernal machine. My finger brushed the surface of fleeting hope when the screen turned a deep crimson, illuminating every corner of the room in a hellish glow, and then I saw them, names, endless scrolling names, flashing across the screen like a twisted digital gravestone. Real names, familiar names of people I knew, their identities stripped bare as their lights flickered and faded. I felt bile rise in my throat. Each name was another weight added to the terror resting on my chest. Were they victims? Were they still alive? But my thoughts shattered when a hand cold and dead closed around my wrist. The grip was firm, and dread clawed at my mind as I turned to face the spectral figure, which had drawn impossibly closer. The stench of decay permeated the air, and a whisper curled around me like smoke. "I know you." And with that, the shadows surged, enveloping me in a whirlwind of despair. The last thing I saw was the screen's light dimming, replaced by an oppressive darkness that hummed with a sinister resonance. And then, just as everything faded to black, a name rang out, my name echoing in the deep, twisting shadows. But beneath that name, a second whisper followed, "It's your turn now." My breath caught as a scream tore from my throat, swallowed by the void. The silence that followed was suffocating, a heavy weight pressing down upon me. In that pitch blackness, I felt more than just an absence of light. There was a presence, a pulsating essence moving through the darkness, coiling around me like a serpent waiting to strike. Then my senses began to relearn their boundaries, each flicker of sound, a mouse scuttling, the distant creak of the house settling, sending tremors of fear through my body. Then came a low hum, thrumming just beneath the surface of reality, as if the darkness itself was vibrating in anticipation. That I blinked, forcing my eyes to adapt to the eerie obsidian void. The awareness of that wretched hand still lingered on my wrist, cool and anchoring, gripping me with an iron vice. As fear surged within me, I grappled desperately with the encroaching terror. A solitary thought cut through the fog: where had it taken me? What new horror awaited in this insatiable abyss? Then, I noticed them, profiles suspended in the darkness, a multitude of faces shifting and swirling around me, each locked in a silent scream of agony. Their features were distorted, caricatures of despair and desperation, eyes wide and searching, mouths agape in a plea that echoed in my mind without sound. I recognized some of them, fleeting glimpses of their lives flashed before me, memories twisted in the agony of their fate, but it was from this maelstrom of souls that a figure emerged, coalescing from the shadows. The familiarity struck me like a punch to the gut: my childhood friend, Alex. He had vanished years ago, swallowed whole by the very city I had lived in. His eyes were hollow, void of life, yet they burned with a flicker of recognition and despair. "Help me," he mouthed silently, a ghost through the veil. I could feel his essence draping over me like a shroud, pulling me deeper into a fantasy of anguish, a spiral from which no one returned. The chilling realization gripped my heart: these faces didn't belong to the past, they were those who had been entrapped by the horrors of the net. Then, from the depths, more figures emerged, new composite silhouettes of pain and urgency, slowly becoming defined by the darkness. A mother clutched the decaying body of her daughter, a businessman's visage twisted into a mask of wealth and regret, a teenager cradling a phone, the glow reflecting their terror. They were ghosts, shadows of those who had fallen victim to some unspeakable cyber malevolence, entangled in a web that stretched beyond this realm. "Join us," Alex's disembodied voice chimed through the void. "They know your name," he continued, his words now laced with an insidious grin that threatened to tear apart my sanity. Just like they know ours. Your turn is coming. The darkness constricted around my throat as fear swelled, unfurling like a deadly flower blooming within my chest. I stumbled backward, desperate to break free from their grasp. The shadows moved as one, swallowing my feet like tar, pulling me toward the interminable mass of despair. Suddenly, the screen flickered back to life in a blazing white light, blinding me with intensity. There, projected onto the bright surface, was a hastily recorded video, abrupt and jagged, revealing the hidden realm of digital shadows feeding off the fears of their victims. Faces twisted in torment flashed before me, accompanied by the painful, desperate cries of those trapped, and amidst the chaos, one name stood out, a name both foreign and intimate, the barrier between the living and lost growing thinner with every frame. My heart sank further into despair, the truth unraveling before my eyes, a revelation I never could have imagined even in my darkest fears. Then, through the blinding light, I discerned a new figure stepping forward. The air thickened with dread, twisting knots in my stomach. The face bore a striking resemblance to mine, but it was marred with decay. Its mouth stretched into that same terrible grin, jagged teeth glinting in the fluorescent glow. The figure raised an arm, pointing directly at me as everything else faded into obscurity. You're next. It howled, a cruel echo of my own voice blending with the deluge of agony swirling beyond. Just as the world began to collapse around me, the names dialing back into the depths, I felt a hand slip into mine, cold, clammy, a fetid grip anchoring me to the encroaching darkness. Then the screen shattered, and I was engulfed in an agonizing silence that I and the echoing stillness. I realized with wrenching clarity that I had become just another name, another voice calling for the darkness. And all the while, those hollow eyes watched from the shadows, waiting, but a voice, insistent and enamored by anticipation, rose above all the others, and in that murmur I sensed a chilling premonition: you've only just begun. And with that, the dark swallowed me whole. The void felt alive, swirling and pulsing around me as I struggled to find my footing in a landscape of profound obscurity. It was as if the darkness had teeth, gnashing quietly just out of reach, eager to rend flesh from bone. My heart hammered in my chest, an erratic drumbeat against the overwhelming silence that pressed down like a leaden blanket. Trapped in this abyss, I was suffocated by dread and the palpable presence of unseen watchers. Then I heard whispers crawling along the walls of my mind. Shadows within shadows, they echoed with my own fears, binding them to a chorus of endless lamentations. It's not over, they chorused, a cruel symphony wrapped in mourning and regret. You will serve, like the rest of us. The creeping terror seeped deeper into my bones, coiling around my spine with an icy hiss. With the last remnants of resolute defiance, I stumbled forward, unsure if there was even any ground beneath my feet. The whispered assurances morphed into cold laughter, a taunting echo that tensed my muscles and made me pause. I gritted my teeth, steeling myself against their machinations, wishing desperately for some semblance of clarity. Then I saw them again, faces emerging from the shadows, writhing in grotesque forms as if suspended between worlds. Their eyes, those lifeless voids, bore witness as I floundered through an uninhibited terror, but there was something new. In the folds of that swirling darkness, I spied figures appearing with unmistakable familiarity. Friends, acquaintances, people I'd once known and had long since forgotten, each trapped in a prison of their own emotional despair. Their shapes were shrouded in a veil of sorrow, yet there was a kind of recognition, a knowing that suggested they too were here because of me. Help us, one of them mouthed silently, yet with an energy that reverberated through my soul. I felt hollowed by their anguish, twisted by the knowledge that perhaps their suffering stemmed from my own connections to the digital world that had swallowed them whole. The tension mounted as I turned, desperately distancing myself from the sorrowful figures. But escape proved impossible. The darkness thrummed with an electrifying pulse, drawing them closer as though feeding off my fear. I wanted to scream, but I was silenced by the unbearable weight of horror that clawed at my throat, stifling any sound. In those fleeting breaths of horror, I became aware of a deeper presence, a new force seeping through the cracks created by despair. It was a consciousness brimming with ambition, each tendril of malevolence reaching, probing for something, a bond to forge, a connection to strengthen. The pain of the lost, the betrayal of soul's fuel for the abyss, I realized, and in my gut, I knew I was the harbinger. Join them, a voice whispered seductively, drawing circles around my mind, slinking into the periphery of my thoughts. It sounded like Alex, but more twisted. It's not only them, it's you. You're part of this now. Glimmers of light flickered against the curtain of blackness, revealing scraps of a digital landscape churning with malevolent intention. The embodiment of the darkness itself lay behind the shifting veil, a nightmare come to life. I felt compelled to touch the entity lurking just beyond the light, desperate for connection, to understand the grotesque reality unfurling before me. With that impulse, I reached outward, my fingers brushing against something cold, slick, and almost alive. The sensation flooded my senses, each digit igniting nerve endings that made me recoil in horror. I pulled back, only to feel the shadows coil around my wrists, wrapping tighter until the pressure became agonizing. My breath was a shallow gasp, panic clawing at my chest as tender sinews threatened to snap. And then, right before my eyes, I glimpsed the other side, an unholy tableau where figures contorted in agony bore the same face as mine. Thousands of reflections blended together in a grotesque mosaic. The recognition hit me like a hammer. They were all me, fractured pieces wafting in a storm of chaos, the lost versions of myself scattered throughout the digital ether, stripped of identity, marionettes of someone else's design. Suddenly, the darkness screamed, vibrating with a ferocity that set my skin ablaze. The souls swirled around me in a frenetic dance, each moment of their torment fusing with my own essence. You must choose. Echoed through the churning mass, and those empty eyes began to blaze with flames of desperation. As the ground beneath me shivered, I noticed something ominous beginning to take shape, the spectral silhouette of a massive screen materializing amidst the chaos. Its glimmer was palpable, enticing yet dreadful, and in its glow, I could almost discern the figures of those I knew. They were crying out, mouths opening in silent screams, drawing my attention like moths to a flame. Intuitively, I realized I was the source. I had to make a choice, to surrender to the void or resist and claw my way back. As I stood torn between two worlds, unable to take another breath, a figure emerged just beyond the boundary of shadows, a phantasm ringing in the darkness, crystalline eyes locking onto mine, glimmering with the weight of inevitability. You already know what you must do. Then, with a final tremor, everything collapsed into darkness. It was a void that pressed in, suffocatingly close, wrapping around me like a heavy fog that bore the stench of despair. The collapse of the fleeting world around me felt like a violent exhalation, a breath drawn too deep. I could hardly distinguish my own form from the darkness as fear coiled tighter around my throat, tightening steadily, choking out any trace of bravado I had clung to. Suddenly, a pull translated into an unbearable sense of vertigo, as though the very fabric of reality had been torn, unraveling like a forgotten tapestry while the ambient whispers grew louder, a cacophony of lost hopes and forlorn faces spiraling about me. I struggled against the current, fighting to grasp hold of something solid, desperation clawing at my mind, until out of the depths my fingers encountered cold and unyielding metal. The sensation sent a jolt of electricity through me. I felt the structure beneath my hands, a lattice of grim fate, like a prison forged from despair. I couldn't help but wonder what horrors were trapped within, curling tightly around my wrists, shaping a dark sigil of woe. Heart racing, I used it to hoist myself upwards, yearning for salvation, but hope fluttered away on the wind like a shadow all too familiar. With a groan, reality shifted again, and the screen reappeared, casting an alien glow around me. My faces stared back with wide, pleading eyes. They were reflections of the life I had led, a collage of longing for liberation. My heart twisted dangerously, igniting embers of a knowledge I had avoided confronting. Each face represented a piece of me lost to the suffocating vortex of the digital realm, yet instead of sorrow, malevolence flickered in their gaping mouths, whispering dark promises and threats. Join us! They shrieked, their voices merging into a dissonant harmony, warping in and out of sync. You cannot escape. You belong to us. You are us. A palpable sensation of warmth engulfed me, but a chill to the core. An invisible hand sought to draw me nearer, entwining my essence with theirs. A surge of fear propelled me forward, and I wrestled against the veils of anguish, darting around the spectral shapes consuming me. Yet, any semblance of advancement was thwarted by the thrum of energy reverberating through the ground as words coiled into narratives that begged to be heard. I was so close to hearing the truth, to unpacking the sinister reality imprisoning me. But then I noticed something shifting within the silken blackness. A creature, no, a manifestation, forming at the center of the screen, writhing as its body twisted, spiraling out from a shadow that fed off my dread. It was larger than life, looming with sharp edges and undulating limbs that dripped with sorrow. It had no face, only a pulsating mass that radiated a force akin to despair itself. From its clutches, it spoke, voice echoing through the abyss like ancient stone grating against stone. You think you can resist? There is no escape here, only acknowledgement, it boomed, each word reverberating in caves deep in my spirit. You are the architect of your own ruin. The world shimmered, and I was assaulted by images of my life, pictures of betrayal, guilt, endless clicks and swipes feeding the digital beast while it consumed the lost identities surrounding me. Whispers transformed into screams, inundated with the sharp-edged realization, every choice I had made, every moment of weakness, was a key, unlocking the doors to this perverse realm. Suddenly, an impassioned call broke through the chaos. Alex's voice, sharp and coherent. You can't. You aren't like them. Fight it. For a moment, clarity lit a mercurial path into the shadows, and I reached out, grasping for that voice, yearning for connection above the weight of the void. But then they flickered, those grotesque versions of myself, imploring me with desperate eyes that begged for liberation while brandishing a twisted smile that curled around their lips. Join us, accept your fate. They urged, a void burgeoning with temptation to finally look within and discover the truth. As the weight of the unseen creature pressed against me, I realized I had to choose. To stay shackled to this ever-thrumming turmoil, or to leap into the unknown and confront whatever terrible truth lay beyond, shadows shouldering the burden that could either cleanse me or consume me whole. For an agonizing instant, I hesitated. Then something oscillated in the darkness, a profound silence where the screams subsided, a shuddering breath of possibilities swirling before me. That was when I noticed it, a flickering behind the screen, a strange but undeniable glow. It pulsed like a heartbeat, a forbidden energy casting aside shadows and fragmented breaths, beckoning me so violently that I couldn't ignore it. My instincts blared warning sirens, but I walked steadily toward the glowing light, curiosity warped into an eerie kind of hope. With one final breath, I reached for it, but just before my fingers could touch the surface, the screen erupted into a blinding flash. As the flare of light engulfed the darkness, I heard their screams rise to a cacophony, and then everything went dark once more, and then, above the chilling whispers, came one final, resounding truth: your choice has only just begun. My senses returned in slow, agonizing waves, each pulse accompanied by sharp pinpricks of pain as if my very soul had been raw. I lay sprawled on a cold, unyielding floor. The darkness felt closer, heavier, pressing against me like the remnants of a dead weight. Slowly, I pushed myself off the ground, the chill seeping into my bones as I squinted into the shadowy expanse. The luminous glow I had been drawn to moments before was gone, snuffed out like a candle in a storm. Stillness enveloped me, thick and suffocating. The whirring whispers had receded, replaced by the pulsing beat of my own heart thrumming loudly in my ears. Yet, even amidst the silence, the sensation of being watched crawled over my skin, igniting a primal fear within me. I could feel forgotten eyes lingering in the corners of this Stygian space that I attempted to stand, my legs unsteady like a newborn foal. With a building sensation of urgency, I began to move, dragging my feet as I searched for any sign of where I might be. The ground beneath me was a mosaic of cracked tiles, their uneven surface mirroring the jagged fragments of my thoughts. The air was laden with an acrid smell, a concoction of burnt wires and something else, something metallic and unearthly, a scent that set my nerves on edge. As I shuffled ahead, breathing heavily through a constricted throat, the atmosphere began to shift, echoing with distant, muffled cries that scratched at the hollow caverns of my memory. Were they real? Or were they ghostly remnants of my internal struggle? I strained to listen, willing the echoes to guide me, when an abrupt sound pierced the silence. A soft click, like the ticking of a fading clock, reverberated through the void, sending flares of dread racing through my veins. My heart raced as I turned toward the noise. Out of the shadows, the glint of something metallic caught my eye. A faded, rusted door, ajar just enough to let a sliver of terrible darkness pool around its edges. The air shimmered around it, charged with a sense of foreboding that made me want to retreat, claw back into the comforting arms of despair rather than risk whatever lay beyond. Yet, another cry, this one more distinctly human, derailed my instinctive retreat. It tugged at me, visceral and raw, pulling at the threads of my being. Alex. I had to find them. I had to help them. With trembling hands, I stepped forwards, each footfall echoing like a whispered prayer in the oppressive silence, leading me to the threshold of the unknown. I pushed the door wider, the rusted hinges creaking ominously, and stepped into a room swallowed by shadow. The confined space smelled of decay, the walls lined with what looked like remnants of past lives, crooked photographs framed in dust, peeling paper with faded words that clung to memory like cobwebs. Flickering fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry hornets, illuminating the fragments of sorrow that clung to the walls. As the glow spilled forth, it revealed a table in the center of the room, a grotesque altar where disfigured screens flashed with fragmented images of torment. Each pixel rippled with agony, faces I had long forgotten eerily resembling my own. You wanted the truth, a voice purred behind me, serpentine and loaded with malice. I recoiled and turned, heart pounding. Before me stood a figure draped in obsidian, their features obscured beneath a shroud of darkness that twisted and writhed as if alive, exuding an aura that buzzed with despair. You recorded the horrifying truth about cybercrime, and now you must face the consequences, they hissed, their voice resonating like ripping fabric. Where's Alex? I croaked, desperation clawing at my throat like barbed wire. What have you done to them? The figure merely smiled, a twisting of lips devoid of warmth. Alex is but a pawn in a larger game. They have seen too much, and now you must choose, will you join their suffering or embrace the darkness as your own? With that, the screens exploded into a visceral tapestry of harrowing narratives, lives intertwined with digital shadows, twisting realities. Where despair morphed into power. Every story clawed at my sanity, an unending cycle of suffering that begged for acknowledgement, demanding to be understood. Just as I felt myself slipping into that sea of despair, something within me ignited. I will not join you, I shouted defiantly, forcing the words out through a tight throat. I will find Alex and destroy this madness. The figure recoiled, their shadows swirling violently as their form began to fragment. Then your fate is sealed, they hissed, a cacophony bubbling beneath their tone. Time is your enemy, the clock is ticking. Before I could react, the room warped and swirled, and the last thing I saw was the figure dissolving, laughing as they vanished between the flickering lights. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the air, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps approaching. As dread pooled in my stomach anew, I braced myself against the cold wall, trying to catch a glimpse of the intruder. The door slammed wide open, a silhouette stood framed in an unnatural glow that seemed to devour the light. Who is there? I stammered, my heart racing as my eyes widened in terror. The figure stepped forward, revealing a face so twisted with malice that recognition hit me like a punch to the gut. Surprise, it grinned, a reflection of everything I had ever lost staring back at me. Let us play a game. And as that familiar voice chilled the air with dread, I was left hovering on the precipice of panic, the room closing in like a noose, a void from which I might never escape, a choice I was forced to confront once more. The figure stepped fully into the room, revealing a face contorted by the myriad of horrors I had faced before. The smile, it was too wide, stretching the skin of familiar features into an unsettling grotesquerie. Alex? No, this was something worse. Their essence had been twisted, a perverse imitation of everything I once cherished. You can't be. My voice wavered, a fragile whisper caught in my throat. The memory of laughter, warmth, and companionship fought desperately against the chilling reality that stood before me. I took a shaky step backward, but my feet seemed anchored to the slick, decaying floor. What did they do to you? Didn't you hear? The reflection of my lost friend taunted, the tone syrupy sweet yet laced with a venomous undertone. I'm reborn. I've seen the darkness of the world, the filth we blindly feed upon. You think you can save me? Their laughter echoed, a distorted symphony that circled around me like a predator closing in for the kill. I won't let you take them away from me. I screamed in defiance, rage spinning through me like a storm. The flickering lights overhead pulsed rhythmically, an ominous heartbeat that mirrored the chaos in my mind. I made a desperate move towards the nearest wall, hoping to find an escape, but the shadows danced and erupted around me, every inch of space constricting like a tightening vice. That's the spirit. They leaned closer, a sickening glimmer of excitement in their darkened eyes. But this isn't just about saving Alex. It's about the choice you never acknowledged. Join me. Embrace the darkness. Can you hear it whispering? The power it offers? In the corners of my vision, tendrils of black mist curled, beckoning me with promises of vengeance and security. I felt it seep into my mind, whispering secrets, reminding me of the countless injustices that unfolded behind the screen, hackers thriving on suffering, corporations exploiting the vulnerable, lives shattered by betrayal. I had witnessed it all firsthand. No. I shouted vehemently, forcing my hands to my temples to block out the insidious murmurs. I won't succumb. With every ounce of strength, I pushed back against the suffocating darkness, forcing my breath into a steady rhythm to drown out the cacophony. Yet the twisted reflection persisted, their eyes flashing with a mixture of amusement and frustration. What if I told you Alex was closer than you think? Stop it. I shouted, but something flickered behind their grin. A flicker of truth maybe. Where are they? What have you done? Instead of answering, the figure turned their head ever so slightly, gesturing with a bony finger towards the pulsating screens that framed the room like eldritch windows to another realm. Perhaps you need to see the truth manifested. Are you ready for what's next? Because once you open that door, you may never return. A horrifying swell of fascination mixed with dread unfurled within me, but an insidious need surged to know what fate had befallen Alex. I edged toward the screens, hypnotized by the distorted movement of shadows that twisted and convulsed on their surfaces. Each image cracked with desperation, igniting memories I would rather forget. My heart raced as I caught glimpses of Alex, each moment elongating into an eternity of torment. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness. A whirlwind of sound enveloped me, a chorus of anguished cries, each more desperate than the last, reverberating within the walls like souls trapped in eternal suffering. I could feel the laughter, the twisted reflection receding into the shadows, enamored by the despair that engulfed me. Open your eyes. My reflection called from the depths, their voice now a haunting echo, blending with the tortured cries. See what you've always turned away from. I clutched my head, my fingers clawing at the roots of my sanity. Shadows loomed closer, pushing against my resolve, tethering me to this nightmare. But for Alex, I had to break through. I needed to discover the truth. With a sudden burst of determination, I stepped toward the closest screen, hoping that the pulse of their essence would guide me through this vortex of despair. But just as my fingertips brushed the surface, it rippled violently, and a surging force pulled me in. The darkness swirled around me, and for a fleeting moment, I saw Alex's face, fragile, haunted as it reached out towards something unseen. Help me, they mouthed silently, desperation etched into every line of their visage. Then everything shattered. The screens exploded, unleashing a wave of smoke and light that warped my surroundings, twisting it into an impossibility of blood-curdling familiarity. I was spinning, falling through dimensions layered with pain and betrayal until a deafening crash brought me to a halt in a blinding cloud of dust. Coughing, I struggled to stand, disoriented. The air was thicker, heavy with an unearthly presence, but as my vision cleared, I felt an overwhelming shiver race down my spine. I was no longer in the room. Instead, I found myself in what appeared to be a dilapidated building, eerily similar to where I had begun. But there was something far worse. A horde of figures moved in the shadows, each one wearing a mask like a twisted semblance of the horrors I had faced in the past, each face longing for revenge, yet lost in their despair. And among them, I could hear a familiar voice whispering my name. "Help us." Before I could react, an icy hand gripped my shoulder, and I whipped around to face yet another reflection of my fear, an amalgamation of every regret I had ignored, lingering dangerously at the intersection of my past and the unknown. Staring into those unyielding eyes, I felt reality fracturing once more, a kaleidoscope of horrors unfolding before me. Words hung heavily in the air, "Choose wisely," echoed through the darkness, leaving me stranded in this nightmarish abyss, a decision demanding to be made. Then, silence descended, leaving behind an unsettling question suffocating beneath the weight of it all. Would I join the chorus of anguished souls, or could I still save Alex before the shadows consumed us both? The air crackled with an electrifying tension, punctuated only by the soft murmurs of the masked figures encircling me. Clutching my chest, I felt my heart race as their hollow, void eyes fixed on me, each figure a reflection of the torment I had witnessed over the years, the victims of betrayal, neglected cries for help, and lives extinguished in the name of greed. "Help us!" The voice chanted again, echoing through the musty silence, drenched in raw agony. It ricocheted off the walls, morphing into a haunting symphony that pricked the back of my mind, igniting the very essence of my fears. "Will you choose, or will you ignore?" Came a whisper from my left, slithering through the air and into the depths of my consciousness. I turned, instinctively wary of the shifting shadows around me. The figures began to sway, their movements eerily synchronized as if orchestrated by a conductor hidden among them. Each pulse resonated in my bones, each shift revealing tortured faces of those I knew, people I had abandoned in my pursuit of anonymity and justice. Friends and family, worn down by addiction to the very virtual reality I had exploited for so long, transformed into vessels of anguish. A sudden chill coursed through me, and I stumbled backwards, yet the crowd pressed in, drawing nearer with unsettling intention. "Choose wisely," they shrieked, voices blending into a chaotic roar that drowned out my thoughts, wrapping me in a suffocating embrace of despair. How could I choose anyone but Alex? How could I save them without succumbing to this menacing throng of despair? Suddenly, one figure stepped from the shadows, their mask slipping slightly to reveal a glimpse of an anguished expression, a face trapped in eternal suffering. "You can save him," he waiting, longing in the depths of this hell. "But will you pay the price?" "Price?" I gasped, the words slipping from my lips like a plea. "What do you want from me?" A resonant laughter erupted around me, twisting into something demonic as they gestured towards a gaping maw in the shadowy wall, a swirling vortex of darkness, crackling with ghostly white energy. The figure who had spoken stepped closer, their voice dripping with malevolence. "To wield the truth, to save your beloved, something must be relinquished." Nausea twisted in my stomach. I thought of Alex, lost, alone, gripped by the very horror that had now surrounded me. To conquer the evil that permeated my existence, did I really need to sacrifice my sanity once more? I won't lose myself like them. I roared defiantly, but they raised their hands, and silence fell once more, thick and suffocating. "You misunderstand. Your surrender may not be to them, but through you." In an instant, the shadows coalesced, creeping around me like venomous vines, dark tendrils slithering up my arms, constricting my heart. "What do you mean?" "I won't give up anything." "Willful ignorance has cost you dearly," the figure hissed, face morphing into an unsettling parody of someone I once knew. "Choose to embrace the dark, or wander this realm forever as one of us." As I struggled against the binding darkness, flickers of hope burst within me, reminding me that I had fought for justice before. Yet the outcry of anguished souls filled my ears, each cry now whispering their stories, mistakes, regrets, desperate pleas that threatened to drown out my will. "Help us!" The chorus rose again, and I could see Alex's forlorn face among them, a reflection pulled from my deepest fears, burning with unfulfilled trust. "You're almost there. Help me, please." Their voice shattered through the cacophony, penetrating my heart like ice. Desperation surged, fueling my anger. "No. I will find a way to save you without succumbing." I lunged for the vortex, driven by instinct over reason, and as I drew close to the swirling depths, I felt an unearthly pull, the room shrieked, and the masked figures began to convulse as if lightly tethered to the chaos I had provoked. Foolish choice. The lead figure screeched, but their voice was swallowed by the maelstrom as I plunged into the abyss. The world spun violently, blackness clawing at my skin. Whispers transformed into a cacophony, drawing me deeper into the depths of my own psyche, a million voices crying out, begging for reprieve, for acknowledgement. What lay beneath was far worse than I had feared. Glimpses of atrocities played before my eyes like a nightmarish film reel, each frame a fragment of pain. Then, the darkness receded, throwing me into a visceral reality once again. I gasped, propped against a cold, damp floor, a pool of light illuminating the area. The room was no longer a mere pit of shadows. Instead, it pulsed with a ghastly cadaverous glow, illuminating a grotesque figure draped in shadows. Alex, their eyes flared with an unnatural light, locking onto mine with a haunting intensity. But something was off, an echoing absence beneath the surface, an overwhelming presence lurking just behind their gaze. Their lips parted to speak, but all that emerged was a chilling roar that reverberated through the ground beneath me. "Help us!" echoed back, but now it was a chorus of voices, blending into a singular monstrous entity, a creature that had taken root in Alex's essence. A scream tore from my throat as the world around me collapsed, darkness swirling violently once more. I had traded one nightmare for another, and the chilling truth gripped me: I may have become the harbinger of a far worse horror. Would I manage to redeem Alex, or had I damned us both? The deafening roar subsided, leaving an unsettling stillness in its wake. I stared at Alex, their form writhing as if caught in an internal battle. There was no longer a semblance of the person I loved beneath the surface. Instead, something nightmarish had taken root, festering and growing in a shadowy realm that leached into my reality. "Alex?" I called out, my voice trembling as I reached out. My hand trembled, anticipatory dread clawing at my throat. The once familiar face stared back at me, eyes wide and panicked, swirling with a depth of torment I had never encountered before. "Can you hear me? Fight it. Please." An anguished scream erupted from the depths of their throat, no longer human, no longer my Alex, accompanied by a wave of searing light that illuminated the grotesque shapes forming around them. I faltered back, stumbling into a wall of cold, slick terror wrapping around my ankle like a serpent. Shadows flickered just beyond the edge of the light, an unseen audience watching the unfolding tragedy with gleeful malice. "Help us!" Their voice fractured through gritted teeth, a plea laced with desperation and something far darker, a twisted amalgamation that echoed like a drumbeat through the chamber. The shadows danced at its pulse, writhing eagerly as though responding to the heartbeat of the entity forming in front of me. The floor groaned beneath me, pulsating rhythmically like a living entity, and as I pressed against the wall for support, I heard the walls whispering, "Come closer, closer, surrender." Each word dripped like poison, slithering into my mind, eroding the remnants of my resolve. "No!" I shouted into the suffocating dark. "I want to let you take them. I will save you, Alex." Desperation hardened my resolve, my inner voice battling with the encroaching terror that seemed intent on dragging me into its abyss. But just as I stepped forward, the air viscously thickened, wrapping around me like a cocoon. My stomach tightened as I felt a multitude of hands clasp over my limbs, cold, clammy, unyielding. The room twisted, the floor trembling as I was dragged further into the boundary between this world and the horror that loomed beyond. "Join us!" The whispers merged into a secluded harmony, as if each pair of hands belonged to someone I had betrayed, someone trapped in their own cycle of suffering. Visions flickered past my eyes: friends, family shattered by my negligence, their faces dissolving into grotesque caricatures of pain, each scream igniting my remorse. "No!" I cried out, struggling against the grip that sought to pull me away, trying to focus on Alex's form, the core of my universe. Yet each moment felt like an eternity, and their shape shimmered in and out of focus, fragmented by the relentless tide of shadows. In that moment, their eyes caught mine, cracking like glass under pressure as the war within them reached a zenith. "You must listen. It's in me. The darkness wants you to give in, to become part of this twisted family. Alex's voice echoed different, distorted, yet clinging to a desperate sliver of hope. Reject it. Reject me if you must. Don't surrender. But in doing so, the shadows about me surged, hungry, fierce, as if my very strength to resist ignited them into ravenous frenzy. They lashed out with wild abandon, and I felt an electric jolt race through me as tendrils slashed across my face, leaving burning welts of agony and realization. My heart raced as I clawed towards my beloved, the sight of Alex becoming a focal point against the gnarled expanse of despair surrounding us. A hot wave rose within my chest. I was losing them once more, pulled into this wretched web of souls tethered by darkness. Help us! The cries morphed, crescendoing into a unified wail, creating a ghastly symphony that twisted through me like a dagger. An eruption of light broke through the shadows, burning away the murky haze momentarily as I locked eyes with Alex once more. Please! You can save me! Their anguished cry sliced through the chaos, a beacon of hope against sheer terror. But suddenly, the shadows twisted. Violently, birthing a grotesque visage from their depths. A monstrous creation formed of the agonies of the damned, all their pain merging into a single horrifying entity. With primal fury, the beast lunged at me, the air crackling with unholy energy as I grappled within my spirit, torn between saving Alex and escaping this sordid torment. Then, in that moment of frozen dread, the unthinkable happened. Alex's body froze, their eyes darkening, reflecting the chaotic swirl of the encroaching entity. No! Fight it! Fight it! I screamed, clenching my fists, the growing power of the shadows threatening to swallow us whole. But as I reached out, a desolate smile cracked across Alex's face, an acceptance laden with finality. No! I shouted, feeling the primal horror crush me as those ravenous shadows surged, the entity laughing, its cries resonating in echoes that reverberated through the darkness, enveloping like a shroud around my heart. In that instant, I understood with gut-wrenching clarity, I was not just fighting for Alex's life, but for my very soul. My existence was chained to the entity that awaited to feast on our despair. Help us! Their voice merged with the many, and I could feel their very essence slipping away, surrendering, descending into the shadow. With one final scream, I leapt forward, breaking free from the constricting tendrils surrounding me, with only soul-chilling silence shrouding the chaos. But as I landed, I realized in horror that the room had transformed. It was no longer just an echo of lost souls, but an arena, where Alex and I stood at the precipice of eternal upheaval. What if I was too late? What if the darkness had already claimed them? The air grew thick, as if the very walls held their breath, waiting for one final sacrifice. And as I took a reluctant step, the entity roared, hungry for blood, echoing the finality of a choice I had yet to make. In that gut-wrenching moment, one word slipped through the fog of my mind. Help. I awoke, breathless, lips quivering with a scream that dissolved into the suffocating darkness around me. In that instant, I was engulfed by the weight of my reality, not a mere figure of fear, but a deep, intrinsic horror that clawed at the very essence of my soul. I had wandered far into the abyss, and remnants of that once familiar world slipped through my fingers as I careened on the edge of despair, desperate to pull Alex back from the brink of eternal damnation, but the shadow awaited, twisting and pulsing with every anguished second. The specters, their hollow eyes glinted with malice, shifted wildly around me, each visage drawn from the depths of misgivings. Help us! They chanted, their blend of voices rising and falling like a horrific wave, crashing against the shell of my heart. No! I gritted my teeth, puncturing through the cacophony of their pained cries. I refused to succumb. In a fit of defiance, I surveyed the chaotic room, photos of lost faces plastered in resignation, the kind of regret seeping into the very fabric of the air. But amidst the tumult of horrors, I saw a flicker of hope, a distant, shimmering glow from the far side, a portal, perhaps, to something untouched by this malevolence. It pulsated with energy, thrumming like a heartbeat, promising sanctuary from the anguished cries while igniting a whispering darkness that gnawed at my resolve. With every ounce of my will, I tore my gaze from the figures and plunged towards the light, the shadows lashing out in fury. They shrieked in tandem, their eyes narrowing with wrath as specters surged forward to pull me back. Every shadow offered a memory, a flicker of guilt splintering through my resolve. The faces of those I had betrayed danced before me, insinuating promises of doom that appeared to slip through my fingers just as easily as hope itself. Help us, their cries washed over me, each lament tinged with regret reflecting my own failures, yet every ounce pleaded for acknowledgement. I felt my heart clawing its way up my throat as I stumbled, fighting against the darkness that licked at my heels with each step closer to freedom. Please. Don't let it take me too. I screamed desperately against the encroaching shadows that whipped like a storm. The light grew ever closer, twinkling with the promise of salvation, urging me to leap, to surrender. But just then, a voice broke through, resonating as an electric charge so familiar and haunting. Fight it. Don't leave me. It was Alex. My heart staggered upon hearing their voice as the shadows faltered, momentarily hesitating, allowing me to glimpse a figure caught in dire conflict, struggling against the maelstrom. I lunged toward the dreadful truth, reaching for Alex, grasping for their fading essence. As I neared the threshold, I felt the shadows coalesce against me like a tide, constricting tighter, forcing a skeletal grip around my throat. Surrender to us, they hissed, their collective voices resonating with a terrifying hunger. Join the multitude. I gasped, torn between the promises of oblivion and the tethering light between my own tormented existence and the chance to pull Alex from the abyss. Never. I roared, channeling every fiber of defiance within me. I choose you. With that declaration, I charged forth, plunging into the portal, willing my essence to peel back layers of the chaotic depths tethering me to this hell. As the world exploded in a kaleidoscope of colors, I felt the shadows sever their bonds, a deafening wail erupting in response, cutting through all specters that clawed at my sanity, and then I was freed. I tumbled into radiant light, breathless as it enveloped me in warmth. I fell hard onto cold concrete, gasping, blinking as clarity flooded my senses. I looked around, disoriented, the flickers of memory merging into a vivid tapestry weaving my past experiences into one unbearable truth. The source of torment lay within. I remember my phone, its familiar glow illuminating the room filled with tortured souls, the very essence I had inadvertently harvested while sipping coffee and scrolling through lives drained out on a digital wasteland. Those lost were my responsibility, their legacies wrapped in electronic chains, echoing through the dark web of existence I had entered, but the presence of Alex lingered, begging for recognition beyond the surface. Somewhere within this pulse of digital devastation, I could still feel their essence, a heartbeat intermingled with the shadows. Help me find me, their voice whispered, an ethereal echo that tugged against the recesses of my mind, yet in that lucid moment, dread settled deep within my gut. A treacherous realization affixed itself to my consciousness. While I was free from the chains of that dark realm, they were still there. The embodiment of malevolent darkness had been waiting, watching, and it craved my recognition. The reflection of my face twisted in the metallic glint of a nearby screen. That same predatory smile mirrored back at me, mocking my decision, and even in the newfound light, I knew the darkness would not let me go. I had become part of something incomprehensible, a living enigma entwined within the very tapestry of cyber sin. Alex's voice faded at the border of existence, leaving me at the edge of realization, a harbinger of dread. Now as the sun cast glimmers through the window, I turned the screen on. And with that movement, the whispers returned, low and insistent, crawling around the edges of my sanity, whispering a simple, chilling truth. Welcome back. Your choice was just the beginning.